Yeah.
Portfolio.
Namaste and very good morning to all of you, and welcome you to the fourth day of the IDY webinar series. And the theme of today's discussion is on yoga for cancer. And this is very, very important because we see the cancer rates are climbing up in our country. It is causing a huge burden on the healthcare resources in our country, and people have to live with cancer throughout their life. It's a chronic disease, and therefore it requires more care and more attention and more amount of resources apart from the modern medical care, wherein you need to have yoga, you may have Ayurveda, you may have any other kind of pathis here, which can help in improving the quality of life of patients. So let us now, we have experts with us today. I'm very fortunate to have two experts here. Dr. Naveen Salins, who is the head Department of Palliative Medicine, will come to his introduction later on, and Dr. Professor Ramesh Bidimaga, who is a very senior radiation oncologist in our country. So welcome to both of you, sir, for gracing this occasion. We also have Dr. Gopinath, who has sent his video because he's on a surgery right now and he couldn't join us today at this particular hour. So, but anyway, we will take these discussions forward, and we have with us Dr. Sapna, who is the moderator of this particular function. She's a young research scholar, and she's also a consultant yoga therapist at SCG Bangalore Institute of Oncology. I now request upon Dr. Anusuya to introduce the moderator, and the moderator is going to in turn introduce the speakers.
Okay, namaste and welcome you all to our fourth day of our webinar series on the occasion of International Day of Yoga. The theme of today's webinar is Yoga for Cancer. And the moderator of this day is Dr. Sapna. She did her bachelor's degree in Naturopathy and Yogic Sciences and completed her MD in Clinical Yoga from SDM College of Naturopathy and Yogic Sciences. She has been awarded the Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences and gold medal in both UG and PG. Currently, she is a clinical yoga consultant in HCG Cancer Hospital, Bangalore. I'll hand over to Dr. Sapna to introduce our eminent and distinguished panelists and moderate the session. Please welcome Dr. Sapna.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Anusuya. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome the dignitaries. Dr. K.S. Gopinath, who has actually sent us a video message. I'll briefly introduce Dr. K.S. Gopinath, Professor of Surgical Oncology, Devraj Aras Medical College. He is the recipient of the prestigious Padma Shri Award for his excellent work in the field of cancer treatment from the Honorable President of India in the year 2010. He's also the Board of Director of Asian Oncology Society, Council Member of National Academy of Medical Sciences, and he's also the recipient of the Dr. B.C. Roy Award from Medical Council of India, New Delhi. Sir's main area of interest in oncology are in breast cancer, head and neck cancers, oral and cervical cancer surgery. It's also my privilege to welcome Dr. Professor Ramesh S. Bidimaga. He's a professor of radiation oncology at HCG Group of Hospitals. He has 38 publications in his name and 1,124 citations. Sir is the president of Indian Association of Hypothermic Oncology and Medicine. He's also the president-elect for Indian Society of Oncology. Welcome to you, sir. Dr. Naveen Salins, professor and head, Department of Palliative Medicine and Supportive Care, Kasturba Medical College, Manipal. Sir is the coordinator of Manipal Comprehensive Cancer Care Center. He's the course director of British Medical Journal Palliative Care Training. Sir is also the director of EPEC India program. Welcome to you, sir. Very shortly, Dr. Brinda Sitaram will also be joining us. Dr. Brinda Sitaram is the group head of psycho-oncology at HCG Cancer Care Center. She has completed her MPhil and PhD from NIMHANS and is a founder director of Center of Psycho-Oncology for Education and Research, Bangalore. Her primary area of interest is in adult and pediatric psychology, and her secondary areas of interest is in preventive psycho-oncology. She is also a recipient of multiple fellowships from prestigious institutes such as National Cancer Institute USA, among many others. So we will shortly be introducing, she'll also be joining us. Welcome all of you. So we will begin the webinar. So my question will be to Dr. Ramesh sir. Sir, my question to you will be from an oncologist point of view, sir. You see that there is a sudden rise in the number of cancer cases. And we see that younger population is being more prone to this disease, right? So which was not the case earlier. So why do you think that there is this shift these days? Over to you, sir.
Really, the incidence per se has risen. That is there. It is not all cases of a cancer has shifted its age demography. Not all. The few of the cases are still the problem or issues of the older age group. But what we see the demographic changes, and there's a change between the western the people getting affected the cancer and the eastern and part of it. And the eastern part almost 10 years ahead of the western part that we see. Probably this is a demographic change, but otherwise I don't think there's any issue. But per se, the whole the incidence is increasing. That is why we are seeing more and more. That is, having said that, there are certain diseases which are increasing, or for example, the habit-related cancers like tobacco, alcohol use. Those are the ones which are rising in the younger populations. That is the one which we'll have to keep that in mind. And there are certain cancers and which are related to the hormonal changes in the body. They are also increasing, and that is because of the hormonal milieu of the body, and that is affecting the the genesis of the cancer in patients.
Right. Thank you, sir. Now I would like to move on to Dr. Naveen, sir. So now that the era which we are in, the COVID pandemic era, so I would like to ask you, sir, now because of the pandemic, stress has been really high. Like sir said, that stress has been really high because of various reasons. Now, do you think that this COVID-induced stress which is there has any impact on the cancer incidence, on the diagnosis, and on the treatment prognosis part, sir? What is your take on this, sir?
There has been, am I audible, Sapna? Yes. There has been a tremendous impact of COVID on cancer, and a lot of this impact is related to access, isn't it? So because of the COVID associated lockdown or other restrictive measures employed by the government, the access to a timely treatment is being hampered. So when we talk about access, it could be at the stage of diagnosis. So the diagnosis might be getting delayed. The primary doctors who are seeing may not be referring in a timely fashion to the specialist. So that could be one of the reason why there is an access. And two, who already has been diagnosed and on treatment, their treatments are getting interrupted, or treatments are getting delayed, the surgeries are getting delayed, or the other forms of cancer treatments are getting delayed. And the third segment is that those who have completed treatment on follow-up, or those who are needing mainly symptomatic treatment, even their treatment is getting affected because of the pandemic. And all these things probably is contributing to a significant stress, because if you take from a perspective of a cancer patient and their families, their main concern is that the cancer is not getting diagnosed or getting treated, or they're not getting supportive care therapies. So any form of these delays in access or continuation or interruption of treatment definitely adds significant stress. And this significant stress could manifest in many fold, isn't it? Yeah. So that's what I would say.
Correct, Dr. Naveen. That's just 1 second. The only addition is as far as the incidence is concerned, it takes a little bit a prolonged time to happen. So we may not see any fluctuation in the incidence right today, but over a period of time, and certainly we are going to see the changes that's going to happen, and maybe 2 or 3 years later, we are going to see the effect of this at that point of time. So from the triggering point to the actual occurring, there will be a lag period.
Yes.
I would also just to interject here, I would like to even invite Dr. Brinda Sitaram, who has also joined this panel discussion. Welcome here, madam.
Oh, thank you so much. Sorry, there were a few technical glitches.
Not at all. Thank you. We're happy that you are here. You joined here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you.
Sapna, please go ahead.
Yeah. So actually, before we actually proceed, I wanted to ask Ramesh sir, what has your experiences been of your experiences of yoga in cancer patients, sir?
Probably my first experience of yoga with cancer therapy started at HCG itself, way back in 2009, 2010, when I was in HCG and Dr. Raghavendra Rao was there. And we worked in a very integrated manner. And our department was called Integrated Oncology Department, where it was not just the palliative care and the supportive care that was there. And we have many people integrating together. We had a team of dietitians, physiotherapists, yoga therapists, psycho-oncologists, everyone integrating together. The one important shift that is there is most of our medical management is very disease-centric model, isn't it? So we wait something for it to break to fix it, or something to go wrong to repair it. So this is very to act upon after it has happened. But integrated care, especially with yoga involvement, was more of a promotive health, where interventions were offered even when they did not had any issues, isn't it? So that we anticipate some of them and happen and avoid it from happening. So we had a great benefit from working with the yoga department. And it's not just my singular opinion. And if you look at various evidences, published evidences that are there, like there are many systematic reviews and randomized controlled trials in various populations across the world, not just in India, across the world, where yoga interventions have shown to improve quality of life, improve certain symptoms, especially fatigue and anorexia. It is supposedly, it improves the distress of the symptom. Suppose if there is a pain, and pain is associated with the distress. So along with the pharmacological treatment that what you give for pain, the distress of the symptoms comes down. And it probably improves mood, anxiety, lessens depression. We have Dr. Brinda Sitaram, who's an expert who would probably say. So all mindfulness based interventions like yoga has a huge impact on quality of life.
Correct. That's right. Naveen, you're absolutely right. As far as our experience, is concerned, it is like this. The moment the patient is asked to take a therapy, be it any kind, so starting from surgery, radiation, or chemo, or anything, the patient go to a shelf. They think that absolutely no physical activities need to be done, and they are psychologically, the psychological onslaught they experience. So therefore, they get into a sedentary mood, which is certainly not good at all for the patient. And yoga is one, and which really brings them back to life, which is the very important part it should be an important part of their day-to-day activity, and which keeps them going, not only from the point of view of just the well-being, even for the disease process, for them to affect, and this is of immense help. And when we are giving a radiotherapy in certain cases, example, in the breast cancer patient and who has undergone surgery, and they don't use the that part of the upper limb at all. They think they're using it as something is forbidden, and they get into a big problem. But whereas use of yoga and makes that part and quite flexible and easy to use, and they start experiencing of usage of those parts. One number two is their general well-being, and we can very easily make out they are much better than any other patient who is not used to yoga treatment or therapy in these situations. That's our experience.
Thank you, sir. You've spoken about the psychological aspect. So I would like to ask Dr. Brinda, ma'am. Ma'am, how would you counsel, ma'am? How do you counsel cancer patients to manage their stress levels, ma'am? What conventional approaches are used, and to what percentage is yoga given to these patients, ma'am? Dr. Brinda, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Ma'am, you have to switch on your camera first.
Sorry?
Kindly switch on the camera,
okay.
please.
Thank you. And first of all, before I respond to that, I think I'd like to make one small correction.
Correct.
We really do not engage in counseling. We're not counselors. Psycho-oncologists are hardcore therapists. So the therapists are kind of trained differently because, there are scientific models and scientific techniques available to deal with, patients and their families' distress. So therefore, the first fundamental thing is, of course, the evaluation itself, because assessing the psychological needs of patients and their families, I think that's very important. And I think all of you would agree, the panelists as well as, the participants here, that cancer patients don't really, come across as having only a particular psychological difficulty. It is a mixed bag. They're anxious, they're depressed, there is guilt, there is fear, there is uncertainty. It's a whole bunch of things that they go through. So obviously the therapeutic approach also needs to be a cocktail approach, because you cannot be using one particular technique with them. So therefore the psychological therapies are generally a very mixed bag, and it keeps varying too, because what holds good today perhaps will not hold good tomorrow, because mind is a very dynamic thing, and the oncology space brings about newer kind of difficulties for patients at times. The newer therapies brings about certain kind of side effects and so on. So we need to keep tweaking, and the tailor-made approach is the best approach to kind of restore the emotional well-being of patients as well as their families. To respond to the second aspect of your question in terms of yoga, how often I would use it, I think you as a moderator would endorse to what I'm saying. I think I'm the one who keeps you very busy. I keep you on your toes all the time. That's primarily because while we talk about the mind-body nexus, while the psychological aspects to a large extent is about the cognitive process of how we perceive, what we believe, how we think, what our core personalities are, and what kind of resilience or coping methods that we use, all of it, while it belongs to the mind domain, we should never forget the fact that the interplay between the mind and body, it has a huge impact on the body as well. So the physiological changes that patients go through with their anxiety, fear, depression, and so on, while the physical medicine does the symptomatic part of it, I'm a firm believer that yoga does things at a deeper level. When the glands are stimulated the way it ought to be stimulated, for secretions to happen in a particular way, including, the happy chemicals that we all kind of aspire to have, the endorphins, the dopamines, and so on. While the medicines are there, the antidepressants also do the same job. Their effects are short-term and not longer lasting. Patients do develop a lot of tolerance and therefore can have the potential. Also, some of these drugs are addictive as well. That is where I think yoga has a huge role to play in the physiological restoration. Because if the same dopamine kick that one can get out of stimulating a certain neurotransmitter or the glands in our body, why not? So I'm not a great fan of the pharma company, and therefore, I use yoga, I think you can endorse to this left, right, and center. So I'm a firm believer of it. And yes, I think to a large extent, I endorse to what Dr. Ramesh and Dr. Naveen were saying. I think we have seen the benefits of it. Patients are quite well restored. Most important, Dr. Sapna, is also as a living species, more so as a human race, because I can speak for the human psychology of it. We all love control. So actually, if you're giving them these techniques of yoga and other coping methods, it gives them a sense of control over their context. Because when you surrender to a doctor, patients often feel out of control because they're just monitored by what the doctors are saying. And that is when they become powerless. When they have this powerlessness is when they go into this hopelessness. So actually empowering them with these techniques gives them a sense of control. Most importantly, you're actively helping patients participate in their recovery and well-being, engaging them in wellness behavior, including lifestyle changes and so on. Like Dr. Ramesh said, most people are kind of used to a very sedentary life to begin with. And then when they get into an illness kind of a zone, that becomes even more. I think families also kind of overprotect them and corner them in such a way that they do not become physically active. So these are some of the techniques that really help, and I've seen the proof of the pudding is in eating. We see several of our patients doing remarkably well. Patients tolerate treatment very well. And even in the context of COVID and mucor, we have seen the kind of magic that you people have kind of, brought about. So I personally think it is a complementary therapy, and it is a very good subspecialty to have in the total care of patients.
Thank you, ma'am. I totally agree that as a rehab team, we do work together. So I totally agree with ma'am. Now, there's a short video of Dr. K.S. Gopinath. He was not able to join us, so he has sent a video to us. So I request the IT team to play the video.
Good morning to everybody. This is Dr. Gopinath from Bengaluru. I had to thank Dr. Raghavendra and his team and his department, Ministry of Ayush, for welcoming you for inviting me to this meeting. You all know that our Association of Yoga and Cancer is more than nearly 2 decades old. Yoga, we all know that it is one of the oldest system in this country, very cost effective, which earlier we were using it in a very episode manner. More than a decade now, once we have joined with Vyasa University, we started thinking up in a different language, established a department in various institutions of excellence in the country, especially the Cancer Institute. Our journey started way back in the year 2004, when we did the first clinical trial on yoga and breast cancer. We presented the document various forums in the international scene, both at San Antonio as well as ASCO meetings. Today, we are going to celebrate in few days its 7th International Yoga Day. Today, we know that the concept of multidisciplinary team approach has brought in success in the management of cancer. As I always say, cancer cell belongs to every human being. Every human being has worked hard to bring success to achieve. Today, the big C is causing a lot of problem. We are trying to understand big C cancer. Now the same another big C, the corona COVID-19 pandemic has created a lot of terror in the minds of the public. Both these diseases, the phobia is more dangerous than the disease itself. As we understood the biology of the disease, we know that one of the very old famous definition of a cancer, the misguided cell. From then on, we understood biology is the king, development of technology is the queen, and molecular aspect of theranostic is the order of the day. Today, we define cancer as the disease of the genes and molecules. Today, we know that cancer can be cured early if we detect it early. Even if we detect them in the late stage, we use combined modalities of treatment. What I mean by combined modalities of treatment was what we used to see as tragedies in the past has become trophies in oncology. For example, Hodgkin's disease, testicular tumor, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, etc. Hitherto, we had surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, and combined modalities of treatment used to be there with various sequencing formulation, and we understood the biology of the disease, we change the sequence and give combined modalities of treatment. For example, today, along with the combined conventional modalities of treatment, we have various adjunct treatments which is available to us. One of the foremost adjunct treatment we are using, which is cost effective, which can be accepted, which can be followed by every patient, is the yoga. Yoga is one of the simplest form of treatment we can give it to our patient. Once the diagnosis of cancer has been made, we all know that disease, body and mind, there are various immunological and psychological parameters taking place. I know Dr. Brunda and others are there, where we work on psycho-neuroimmunological parameters many decades ago and brought in the concept and introduced counseling for every patient who is diagnosed with cancer. Similarly, along with the psycho-oncological parameters which we have seen, today we are using yoga as one of the modalities as an adjunct treatment in the form of pre-operative counsel. During the post-operative phase, we can use it in various fashions, not only the rehabilitation program, but also in adjuvant treatment like radiation and chemotherapy, followed by hormone therapy and immunotherapy, irrespective of the stage of the disease. Due to technical problems, I may not be able to join all of you. I wish you all the best to all of you so that you will be looking at the other speakers who are involved with us, that the team of HCG, we work like a team, and we were the first one to introduce this concept of yoga department, yoga to everybody. Our first presentation, Dr. Nalini Rao, is there in the panelists who presented our data in ASCO meeting. With all these things, I thank once again the organizers who given me this opportunity and wish you all the best for 7th International Yoga Day. Jai Hind, Jai Karnataka. Thank you.
Well, Sir has beautifully explained since the inception of the yoga department at HCG and our continuous support and our continuous progress. So now I would ask Dr. Raghavendra Sir, who is the director of CCRYN. So my question is, now as all of us know, stress has always been our constant companion. So we wake up with stress, we go to bed with stress. So so how is it that stress is one of the reasons for cancer? Over to you, sir.
This is a very tricky question because this is the same question which has been asked by several patients during my journey with cancer patients in the last 20 years. We do not have a definitive answer for this, whether stress really causes cancers, because we all know that cancer is an inflammatory disease, and we also know that stress can progress or enhance inflammation inside the body, in one's body. and it can also increase the risk for cancer. So there is a study which has been done on animal models. It was published in 1991, I believe, and it was done by the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, where they looked at they injected breast cancer cells into the peritoneal cavity of the mice, and one group of mice they gave restrained stress, means they gave electric shocks when they went to eat the food. Other group of mice, they took the same group of mice. They also gave the same restrained stress. They injected the breast cancer cells into the peritoneal cavity. And the third group also they did the same thing. 30 mice were there in each of the groups. And what they saw is in the first group where the stress was there, they didn't give any stress blockers like beta blockers like propranolol, and they saw almost all the mice died within 15 days, and the cancer already spread to all parts of the body. In the other mice where they are given propranolol as a beta blocker, which can block the effects of stress, they saw about 50% of the mice survived in 15 days. Whereas in the third one, which did not have any stress, but the cancer cells were injected into the peritoneal cavity, except for 2 mice, all the mice survived. So it goes on to show that though we don't know really whether stress can cause cancer, but stress can certainly enhance the progression of cancer. A lot of meta-analysis has been done where they have shown depressive symptoms to increase the rates of mortality in patients with breast cancer. Okay, so this is the answer, but we really don't know the answer whether stress can really cause cancer right now as of now.
Raghavendra, what is important in the cancer cells to know is its a genesis. The genesis has a multifactorial issue for the cancer to occur. And the one is the causative factor, second is a promotive factor. And the stress falls in the domain of a promotive factor. So the moment the causative factor, which is invariably present, which in the dormant condition, in the scenario of the promotive factor, and that picks up. So that's how the galloping of the cancer, the occurrence occurs when the stress situation is there. Otherwise, you don't see cancer in everybody, and whereas the stress people, the incidence becomes more. So there are various factors, and this comes, in the domain of a promotive factor.
Dr. Sapna, if I may kind of add to what Dr. Ramesh and Dr. Raghavendra are saying, I think the study that Dr. Gopinath just quoted, and I think Dr. Ramesh is also part of that study. This was a study that we did using breast cancer as a model to understand the mind-body nexus. That is a hot area of psychoneuroimmunology. And what was found was very interesting. See, it is not stress per se that causes a disease. It's the way you cope with stress. Because all cancer patients, that's how they don't react in the same way, or all of us don't react to a given stress in a similar way. It is the way we perceive stress and the way we cope with it. That is the resources and the resilience that each one of us have, perhaps is the one that really tilts the balance. How it tilts, like Dr. Raghavendra said, it is tricky because the immune system is an orchestra. It is impossible to discern which particular element is really a facilitating factor, while we know that it is a mediating factor. Certainly, in the mind-body nexus, there is a medium that really promotes, certain disorders or, dysfunctionality in the ecosystem of the body.
Yes, ma'am. Like you said, the way we manage is more important, and yoga definitely plays a very important role in it. So I would like to move on to Dr. Naveen, sir. Sir, you have been working in palliative care. So, sir, what is the role of yoga in palliative care, and what cancer symptoms can be managed in a palliative care setting? Over to you.
So, here I would like to talk palliative care in a cancer setting, because palliative care is in cancer and in non-cancer setting. But specifically, we are talking in the yoga in cancer, so I restrict myself to cancer setting. So some of the issues that what we see in patients with advanced cancer needing palliative care is physical symptoms. And common physical symptoms that what we see is fatigue, as I mentioned earlier. They report excessive fatigue. And if you look at management of fatigue, often nutritional supplements or enhanced nutrition do not improve fatigue, because it is more of a catabolic state. That is what we are in. So the strategy for managing fatigue or loss of appetite or loss of weight is completely different. It's not nutrition dependent. Usually it's nutrition independent. So there are certain pharmacological treatment, and this pharmacological treatment has its own side effects. It could be steroids or progesterone analogs like migestrol acetate, which has complications. But what has been tried consistently and has been found successful in managing fatigue anorexia, may not be weight gain, is a yoga intervention. And I was just reviewing certain evidences, and in a lot of quartile 1 journals, like in Q1 journal like Palliative Medicine or other Q1 journal, there's a lot of evidence that is being coming, and both as randomized controlled trials and systematic reviews. So it definitely improves the fatigue scores. It definitely improves the fatigue as a quality of life dimension. So that is one important aspect that it's been found useful. The second important aspect that has been found useful is the nausea. Patients with advanced cancer experience severe nausea, and always the nausea may not be associated with vomiting. And nausea could be a very distressing symptom for these patients. And pharmacological treatments are there, yoga and other complementary and alternate medicines have been found very effective in these kinds of patients with nausea. The third important symptom that what we see is pain. And in pain, there are different kinds of pain. And a lot of our breast and head and neck cancer patients develop myofascial pain, which could be related to post-surgery or post-radiotherapy. And myofascial pains are quite refractory to pharmacological treatment. They are more amenable to exercise-based treatment. And what they have found is in patients with myofascial pain, with an yoga intervention, they do much better compared to a pharmacological treatment. And fourthly, the distress about symptoms. So, when we talk about any symptom, we talk about presence or absence of symptom, the intensity of symptom or the severity of symptom, and distress associated symptom. The pharmacological treatment only reduces the intensity of the symptom, but the distress associated with symptom, which is again a multifactorial thing, where a complementary and alternate medicine is a huge role, especially yoga. So in a very multi-dimensional way, primary purpose of palliative care is improving quality of life, and quality of life has multiple dimensions. And in many dimensions of this quality of life, yoga does have a very positive role in helping those patients. Thank you.
Right, sir. Right. So I would like to move.
Just 1 second, Naveen, you said it very rightly. Now, in all these factors, our patients who are taking radiotherapy treatment, they also experience a fatigue, and particularly in the first 2 weeks. And if we are treating them, the upper abdomen, and they feel a nauseating feeling, and the pain, and the pain and the distress, all these things in which we see, with the radiotherapy patients. And our experience also has been, and these symptoms are really reduced, and when the patients resort to regular use of yoga, that I can endorse that, and with our the experience with yoga. Yes, Swapna, go ahead.
Yes. Actually, my next question was on that, sir, as to how do you think patients who are undergoing radiation, how do you think yoga would be effective? So that was actually my question to you, sir. And
absolutely, absolutely. That is very much in continuation of that. I thought let me talk about it without forgetting. Good. It is helpful. There's no doubt about that.
Dr. Brinda, ma'am, my question to you is, for patients who are diagnosed with cancer, ma'am, especially when it is a progressive cancer, accepting that they are diagnosed with cancer and it is in a progressive stage becomes very difficult. how do you manage such patients, ma'am? And do you think that there is role of yoga in it to help such patients, ma'am? Your experience and your views on it, ma'am.
Well, that's a very vast topic to cover. Acceptance, I don't know with yoga, because acceptance is at a mental plane, because it's the way you look at the context of cancer and then related issues, because very often it could be a family related issue, family related concerns. These are all, that's why I said, you know, there is one at a cognitive level, which is purely the psychological domain. I believe yoga works at the physiological level. You know, while there is an impact on the mind also, but the thinking process, the way we perceive things, the way we kind of, you know, attribute our stressful context or any events in our life, all those things become very important, particularly when you're talking about acceptance. You know, it is not easy. Acceptance is a very challenging, difficult thing, but I think with time they kind of slowly settle down. That's why I said it is too vast to kind of use this platform to explain how exactly the acceptance happens. Very often there is something called spontaneous recovery, like in the physical medicine also. Emotionally also, people spontaneously recover from that zone. You know, initial phase of shock will be there, that numbness will be there. Then, of course, all of you know the Dabda effect very well, which is very applicable even in the context of not just, while I know that Kübler-Ross to a large extent talked about in the terminal phase, I think it is very, very applicable from the beginning of the cancer journey for patients and their families, because the first is the denial. Okay, then comes a phase of bargain. The bargaining is not only, of course, we see this clinically with doctors, where they will say, make sure that, you know, you run through all the tests, do a whole body scan, but please tell me it's not cancer. Are you sure it's my report? That's when they run from pillar to post for multiple opinions and so on, and including bargaining with God, because they make vows, they make deals with God to make sure that, you know, it is not cancer. Then comes a phase of, you know, gradual sense of acceptance will come. That's the last phase. There will be an anger phase, there will be a depression phase, and there will be an acceptance phase. Initially, yes, they will be very resistant, but large majority of people slowly begin to kind of, you know, go into the acceptance zone without too much of, you know, intervention. But there will be a small segment of people who will be from the start very resistant even to understanding. See, that is where even in the psychological techniques or the therapies that we use, as long as denial is not interfering with treatment and then the overall adjustment of the individual, there is no need to break the denial. If somebody says, thank you very much, it's not cancer, I don't need any treatment, and walks out, then that is a point where you really have to deal with the denial. But there are times when patients will say, I know it's not cancer, but you want me to take treatment, I'll just go ahead and take it. It's okay. That doesn't mean you have to really break it, break the denial. So it depends on the context, and there are, like I said, several influencing factors that would interfere with acceptance that we really deal with. But yoga per se for acceptance, no, I really haven't come across that, or I would not use that as a technique for helping patients accept cancer. No, I don't know how it's going to work, and if somebody else has used it and it has worked, I'd be happy to be enlightened by that, but not from my experience.
Dr. Raghavendra sir, sir has worked in the field of cancer using yoga as an intervention, and sir has several publications in national and international journals. So what is the possible mechanism by which yoga helps in cancer patients, sir? What do you say?
Main basic tenet of yoga is calming down the mind. So we use different cues to calm down the mind. We may use yoga with internal awareness. When you do the asana, you are becoming internally aware of the body parts, the aches and pains in the body. You are aware of the breath. You're aware of the thoughts inside the mind. So we use different cues, physiological cues in yoga, basically. So the main tenet of yoga is to develop internal awareness and relaxation. So as you keep doing that, you will learn about what is happening inside your body. You learn about what is happening inside your mind. You're able to stop you're able to trickle down the negative thoughts, you're able to stop the flow of the negative thoughts. You're able to slowly calm down the mind. So basic example, simple example I can tell you is to do deep breathing. So when you start doing the deep breathing, about for example 5 seconds of inhalation with 5 seconds of exhalation, 1:1 ratio, this is called as a sinus rhythm. In basic physiological terms, it's known to evoke a parasympathetic response or a relaxation response. So this has a calming effect on the mind. So how does yoga really work is to bring about a relaxation response on one hand. It helps in calming down the mind. Second one, it brings about regulation of the autonomic nervous system because of the increased parasympathetic activity. And third thing, it has also got metabolic effects, whereas exercise effects are there, which are salutary in nature, which are anti-inflammatory in nature. They also help in numbing the inflammation. And then at the same time, it also helps in improving sleep quality and also changing the abnormal circadian rhythms. Like what we have seen in cancer patients in our own study, which we did at HCG, was in a group of breast cancer patients undergoing adjuvant radiotherapy. So we did salivary cortisol levels at 6 a.m., 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. in the night for 3 consecutive days before radiation and post radiation. So one group received yoga interventions as add-on with radiotherapy. The other group did not receive any intervention. So what we saw was the mean peak salivary cortisol levels were lower in the yoga group compared to controls. And what we saw was in the control group, the salivary cortisol levels were almost flat. It was almost flat and upward slope throughout the evening, whereas in case of yoga, it was a slightly a downward slope which we saw. So the area under the curve, or the total amount of cortisol released during the daytime, was significantly lower in the yoga compared to control. So what does yoga really do is to also help in reducing these stress hormones, because these also act on the inflammation. They also act on the reducing or numbing the anti-tumor immune responses. Okay, they also act on causing muscle pains. They also act on causing fatigue, and they also disturb sleep as well. So by changing these circadian rhythms, yoga plays a very, very important role in cancer patients who have some amount of psychological distress. And yoga is a way of coping with psychological distress. It helps people to discharge attention away from the thoughts, negative thoughts, and away from the problem, and it gives is a venue for the people to cope with that particular distress. That's what I feel about yoga, and we have seen a lot of patients having good respite from various symptoms, psychosomatic symptoms like headache, myofascial pains, as Dr. Naveen Salins was putting it up, chemotherapy-induced nausea, vomiting, okay, following chemotherapy, and you've seen patients having anticipatory symptoms. The moment they come to hospital, they feel sensation of nausea or sensation of vomiting. Even these conditioned responses also come down very drastically by using yoga intervention in this population.
Right. Yes, sir, please carry. So you can unmute.
Rather, many times what happens, the knowledge is being shared and between the professionals, like you say and I hear and I say you hear. When we give this knowledge to our patient, then with the knowledge and when they do a yoga, that has a much more impact on them than just saying do yoga. They think it's just some flexing here and there, the muscle limbs and the body, and that is, and where is the need to do it? I'm already a diseased person. So this is the kind of explanation that is required, and to the patient, which either a clinician or a yoga specialist should impart to the patient first and before actually yoga is started. That gives them a lot of acceptance to take a yoga as a part of their treatment protocol in dealing with the cancer.
With you, and I very much agree with you, sir, and this is what I think we have been also doing in HCG. So what we do is when the patient comes to any yoga intervention program, we try to find out what is the main symptom or what is the main concern or problem bothering them, which is causing them the distress. We work towards reducing that particular problem. So it's always a goal-directed yoga program looking at bringing about respite from symptoms. So once the respite from symptoms happen, immediately their quality of life improves. The acceptance to yoga also really improves. And this we have tried up in HCG and it's working very well, sir.
Yeah, to add to what Dr. Raghavendra is saying, has said, and I think Dr. Sapna will endorse, particularly with head and neck cancers, we have evolved a protocol where it's a prehabilitation. We don't do it after while they're on treatment or after they finish surgery. Even before any therapy starts, all the subspecialties get involved, and yoga is a very integral part of the care of these patients. And that is where, including tobacco cessation and so on, we majorly use yoga, the therapist help as well. And I agree, it really works remarkably well in dealing with some of the withdrawal symptoms such as, agitation, sleeplessness, irritability, and so on. Along with, particularly when we have done the assessment, the chronic ones, of course, will go on medication and will be complemented by yoga as well. The ones who have milder symptoms, we find dramatic results with, yoga. And that is where, Dr. Ramesh, I agree. Sometimes, when we are selling the concept or, we're promoting the concept to patients, we also, talk about how our own experience. For example, I know that you practice yoga and I practice yoga. So we tell them the benefits that we have all derived from it. There will be initial resistance, particularly when they're physically very uncomfortable. They will say, I cannot do the asanas and stuff like that. So that is where, whatever little that we have picked up from the yoga team, we try to tell them that, no, the yoga doesn't mean just asanas. Sometimes just breathing helps, meditation helps and stuff like that. So some of them initially will have resistance, but vast majority now are slowly. That depends on the treating doctor as well as the treating therapist, how we kind of, put it across to them and help them understand the importance of it.
True, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Naveen, sir, so my question is, so as a clinician, so how do you think yoga specialists can integrate into a cancer care, sir? And what are the areas that you think should be focused more on?
So, taking on from what Brinda madam said and also Dr. Raghavendra Rao said, people have a notion that yoga means always asanas, isn't it? And that's probably a huge thing that what needs to change. We always present more it as a mindfulness based therapy. And in those ways, as I mentioned earlier, when we talk about in medical sciences as any symptoms, we always try to explain it in terms of receptors, or if it's, for example, the pain is getting transmitted. But what we often forget is what is called as a modulation of a symptom and perception of the symptom, which happens in the brain. So for any physical symptom, the symptom can get modulated. That means, suppose if somebody has a pain, the person may experience it as a huge pain or a very minor pain, as it is modulated in the brain and finally perceived in the brain. What most of the studies that what it shows is that effect on the modulation of a symptom. So especially in the palliative care practice, what I feel is that how this could help enable in modulation of symptom. And if you see, one of the mechanism by which it works is the endorphin hypothesis that is propagated for yoga, isn't it? Well, increased beta endorphin levels associated with any mindfulness based therapy or yoga. So anytime there are elevated beta endorphin levels, it changes the modulation. So the final perception of the symptom is completely different when the symptoms gets modulated. So in patients with cancer, we cannot take away probably their pain, isn't it? It could be part of their disease progression or complications associated with the disease. What we could do is to manage the pain, and managing the pain or any other physical symptom cannot be only through pharmacological therapy. So we need a good combination of pharmacological and non-pharmacological therapy. And if you look at any Cochrane evidence that is there are evidence both for pharmacological and for non-pharmacological therapy. So in that way, I think it has a huge role which helps our patients.
Right. Like you said, sir, combination is what is needed in cancer treatment. Now, I would like to ask Dr. Brinda ma'am. Ma'am, caregivers play a very important role in cancer patients, ma'am. So how do you think yoga can help in these caregivers, ma'am?
Oh yes, I know the caregivers also go through enormous amount of emotional difficulty, particularly since the chronic, cancer is a chronic illness, and the treatments are pretty long drawn, and while caring for them, caregivers burnout is very well known. They lose a lot of sleep, and their whole routine goes for a toss, and there are various emotional shifts along with all the physical difficulties that they go through. So when we talk about caregivers, even professionals like us, we are professional caregivers. I think we also need some kind of coping methods, and I think yoga plays a huge role. And I think quite a few of us in HCG as professional care providers engage in it, and you yourself conduct this program every Saturday, so you find a lot of our staff also using it. But having said that, for the patient's primary caregiver, I think it's a very important part. It has a very important role to play, and that also gives some kind of when they participate in this together, maybe they're doing things together and stuff like that, that also would motivate the patient also to start engaging in yoga therapy.
Yes. Now we've spoken a lot on yoga, that yoga is really helpful in cancer patients. I would like to ask Dr. Raghavendra sir, what kind of yoga is suitable for cancer patients in IP or in OP setting? So what kind of yoga is suitable, sir? Over to you, sir. Okay. So before, I think sir is busy, held up somewhere. So my question.
Sorry, can you just repeat it if you don't mind?
Sir, we've spoken a lot on cancer. I mean, yoga is helpful for cancer patients. So what sort of yoga, what kind of yoga is helpful for a cancer patient, sir? In IP or in OP?
It's a very good question. As other speakers also put it, yoga is not just about asana. Yoga means the science and technique of calming down the mind. It can be relaxation techniques. It can be chanting some mantras. It can be even a prayer. It can be even a simple breathing exercise or technique. Or it can be just relaxing and learning to relax using your contracting muscles, different muscle groups, or just lying down, becoming aware of your breath. Okay, so all these things are nothing but different aspects of yoga which can be used to calm down the mind. So here, when it comes to yoga, people should also have to be very cautious on which kind of yoga to be used and where to be used. We have seen several episodes. For example, a patient comes with fatigue. We need to really identify the patient has got hyponatremia, as a patient is anemic or not, because if the patient has some hemoglobin percentage of something like 6 gram percentage, and you're making the patient do Surya Namaskar and other things, you're going to be worsening her condition. So you need to be really see for the clinical condition of the patient before you impart any sort of yoga intervention. Even with hyponatremia, when sodium levels are very low, you ask a patient to do jogging and do some dynamic losing exercises or warm up before doing yoga. Patient may have a fall, she may have a syncope. So that's again a problem. Patients who are on aromatase inhibitors over a long term, especially breast cancer patients, they tend to have problems with respect to calcium metabolism. They have osteoporotic fractures. They tend to have those things. So acute forward bends, acute back bends, all these things should be avoided in these patients. Hyperventilation techniques are there. There are some things called Sudarshan Kriya Yoga, Bhastrika Pranayama, Kapalabhati Pranayama, which are also having salutary effects on depression. But when you start using it in patients with lung cancer, with lung metastasis, receiving radiation to the lung, you should be very careful of not causing a pneumothorax. There are evidences of Kapalabhati causing a pneumothorax as well. So these are some of the important cautions one should take while practicing yoga, especially when cancer patients are concerned. And more so, if a patient have a metastatic disease, with bone or spinal metastasis, most of these acute bends have to be really avoided.
Yes, thank you. Ramesh sir, in your experience of evolving the cancer field, you've been working for decades. Now, sir, you might have come across patients who would have deferred the medical management and would have resorted to an alternate therapy. So what is your advice to such patients, sir?
Yes, when we talk about the word alternate therapy, many times things are being misread. The word alternate and must be really very well defined. We are not talking about. We must make sure that we are not talking about a quackery. irrespective of what system of medicine they practice or what system they really believe in, and that is the one they will have to teach. In other words, what I'm saying, the experts alone, be it any system of medicine, and should manage the patient. So long as that is done, it is okay for for us. Otherwise, what we see in our practice is alternate medicine means even getting into a quack, going to a quack and getting whatever he says and get the treatment and use the name of homeopathy, homeopathy or Ayurveda, or and spoil the real good name of our the best system of medicine that we have. That should not happen. So that is where we have a big resistance to send our patients to alternate therapy. On the other hand, a good understanding of a very qualified and practicing the alternate medicine person along with the allopathic system of medicine, that is the best combination that I can really think of. And the HCG is one which is always promoting that system of medicine.
I think to add to what Dr. Ramesh said, I think it's a good idea to use complementary therapy. Replacing the word sorry.
Can you please switch on your camera, please?
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was saying, I think the word alternate therapy can be replaced by complementary therapy. I think, yes, the perception of alternative therapy would be that, we are engaging in something that is not quote unquote scientific. But yoga is a science, so we could probably use it as a complementary therapy. And I think now that Dr. Raghavendra heads this huge division, maybe you could work towards that, because the resistance for this word alternative is as good as the resistance for psycho, because psycho again means mind. So a lot of people would be kind of resistant. So it is a subspecialty. So I don't know whether complementary therapy would be a better terminology.
Sure, Brinda. In fact, I'm totally against calling it as an alternate. Why do you want to call it as an alternate?
Correct.
By itself, it's a good specialty by itself. You call it as a yoga therapy. You call it as I know Ayurvedic treatment. You call it as a homeopathic treatment. Or Unani treatment. That itself is a platform by itself. Why it should be called as alternate? Alternate to what? As if there is a gold standard? No way.
Yeah.
So just to add on to this discussion, complementary and alternative medicine was coined in 1994 by NIH. So they had NIH NCCAM, which was formed in US to guide these kind of therapies. But of late in 2014, this NIH NCCAM has been rechristened as National Center for Integrative Health. They're not even going to complementary, they are going to integrative health now. So that is where, because there's a lot of evidence for use of these therapies now, and because they have a good level evidence, level 1, level 2 evidence for these therapies, they are now integrating these in the guidelines and integrating these as a part of the therapy as well. So that's why now they're going towards from alternative to complementary, from complementary to integrative. So now we are talking era of integrative health, sir.
Correct. That's the way to go. Absolutely agree.
Yeah, and I think we should be using, but at least in the clinical context, we should talk about yoga therapy instead of just saying go for yoga. If we use the word therapy, there is an indication that it is a treatment that is going to facilitate overall well-being.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. So I think we are nearing the end of the session, and we would like to thank all of you, all the speakers, for spending your valuable time in the mornings. I'm sorry for some glitches we had with Microsoft Teams, and it has been a pain for most of them to join on my Teams most of the time. I apologize for that particular glitch. And it was a very eventful discussion, wonderful discussion to look at various aspects of integrating yoga into cancer care and different aspects of care as well. I thank all of you, sir, Dr. Ramesh Midimagga, sir, Dr. Brinda Sitaram, and Dr. Naveen Salins, as well as Dr. Gopinath, who at least painstakingly did his video from his OT room to make up for his loss of him being here. I thank everyone for your warm words and your intellectual discussion and making this discussion happen. This is being beamed through the Facebook of the Ministry of Ayush social media pages, as well as through the Ayush Virtual Convention Center, where a lot of people are watching it, sir. Thank you so much for your interesting discussion, sir. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, and all the very best for the International Yoga Day.
Yeah.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Good day.
Good day.